some people jokingly say that booth models kind of like suffer from the syndrome where they look the same. And that's essentially kind of true. Some avatars that have been released recently, they very much look like a Kokoa or a Kikyo, but just a little bit different. Or a...
Welcome to Metaverse Degen. I'm lying.
I'm Old Man Raptor, and our guest is...
Hi, I'm Sasch, and I create a website called BOOTHPLORER, amongst doing some other several small things you've maybe seen me around doing.
Oh, well, thank you very much for joining us, Sash. It's an absolute pleasure to get to meet you. Thank you for your time.
Yeah, very much so. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Thank you
for having me.
Oh, so
Mm-hmm.
how did you get into VRchat, and how did you end up getting to make BOOTHPLORER? Oop.
Yeah, sure, I can explain that. So I started playing VRchat the first time around 2017, 2018. I had like this very old Oculus kit in a very small room. Back when those like base stations that you have nowadays.
Hmm?
Now they were like spotlights. I don't know if you like have ever seen how they look, but they were not that great. But they did the job. And I started playing VRchat as well when I got that headset because of this Ugandan Knuckles meme that was very popular back in the day. Yeah, it was just funny for a little bit, and then after some point you kind of like get bored, you don't really go deeper into it, and you will stop playing. I put my VR headset like somewhere to get dust, and I haven't looked back at it ever since. Then at some point, I got back into VRchat, bought a Valve Index kit and whatnot, because that was during the apologies, during the pandemic. COVID and everything, that stuff. So we were outside a lot, or well, forced to be inside a lot. My country had some kind of like regulations going, which, well, didn't really make it that tempting to go outside. But I remember before that playing Final Fantasy XIV and owning a venue with several of my friends. So venues in Final Fantasy XIV are kind of like the same as you would think of them here in VRchat, but there's no like VR involved. You just have your character sitting, standing, doing whatever inside a public housing of another player or free company, and just being on a Discord call with people and chilling. And that kind of like that difference with clubbing in Final Fantasy XIV, and then when I got my index again, started playing VRchat again and discovering those VRchat venues, yeah, that's kind of like where I was like telling my friends like, hey, this thing in VRchat is really cool. And took a lot of convincing for them to come along with me to try it out. Well, it wasn't that long. No, it wasn't that long. It's just that it took a little bit of convincing at certain times to get those people, like my friends that I owned the venue with, to try it out and see what I mean with it being so cool. Or, well, yeah, more in-depth, immersive than obviously Final Fantasy XIV's. Yeah, and that kind of like went quick. I started at a EU venue called Sound Empire. Well, yeah, the event was called Sound Empire, but the event branch it's on is called Five Tribe. Yeah, at that time owned by Dr. Nope and a person called Remlist. And it was my first stop and spot to really kind of like understand venues, to experience them. A very welcoming crowd back then and nowadays still. Like they're very beginner friendly and they're very welcoming. And yeah, after attending an event there and then another one, yeah, I was pretty much set. And that's exactly that point where I started, as I said before, nagging my friends about like, hey, you need to come try this out. It's very cool. And yeah, so I've been, as you can probably tell, I've been playing VRChat for quite a bit. Which means that I could keep talking like a long length of many things I've kind of like done in the game, but yeah, that's basically a first good point to stop.
Oh, wow. So you've been in for quite a bit. So what is BOOTHPLORER, and what events led to the creation of it?
Okay, well, BOOTHPLORER is kind of funny how it led to its creation. I'm gonna explain first real quick what BOOTHPLORER is, real short. It's a item catalog kind of thing that has it's basically booth, but it only scrapes and fetches specifics at this time relating to avatars and the items, because navigating through Booth is sometimes not that easy or straightforward for people. Example being, if someone is new to VRChat and you want to explain to them how to get a Booth model because you have a rind or whatever, and that's kind of like how it goes. Like they tell their friends to be a Booth model, nothing else really, and then having to explain to them that you have to navigate through a Japanese website that does have, you can use it in English, but it's very complicated and very cumbersome, also slow at times. And that's kind of like one of the reasons I made the app. But the event that led to me actually working on it, the literal first minute, I thought like, okay, I just probably gonna make something myself. I was on another third-party website called Avatar Network, and they kind of like do the same thing BOOTHPLORER does, but not as much and with a more modern look. Respectfully, right? Yeah, it's a bit like Japanese web design. It tends to be not that great. It does the job, it's not that great. But back to what I was talking about, I remember wanting to search for Kikyo on that website, and it got me something from Kikyo, but it wasn't Kikyo itself. Even though I was looking for Kikyo itself, it linked me to some swimsuit or something, and I was just like, oh, whatever. It's kind of just annoying to search for long links for things when it comes to Booth. So, and that's all of that point where I started making my own website.
Wow. So with BOOTHPLORER, does it lead back to Booth, or does it host everything on BOOTHPLORER?
Okay, so there's a very precise answer to this question, but the short answer is that all the items and avatars you see, they all link back to Booth. We can't host them because we don't own them. But what we do is, for example, images on that website from items and images from shops, because shops can have their avatar. Those, for example, are being stored locally on our CDN because having the website like BOOTHPLORER and then constantly getting images from Booth CDN itself is also slow, but also not really a good thing to do. So it's actually something we're recently working on to make sure that all the images that are on the website from items and shops are actually on our CDN and get used while you browse, so you can browse way faster without ever having to wait for Booth, because sometimes Booth just gets super slow, and well, it's kind of like what BOOTHPLORER also tries to do, make things just tap a bit more faster, really.
Oh, wow. So I take it you have web design knowledge in the real world as well that you brought in, or did you teach yourself everything in order to be able to make BOOTHPLORER?
No, I was in college as a software developer, and at some point when I finished my college, I did have a job in software development, several even, but when the peak of COVID kind of came to be, I kind of lost my job along with other factors that made it happen, unfortunately. And ever since I lost my job there after COVID, in that field, I kind of decided I wanted to do something else. So in this case, I currently work as a mailman for the local big mail post office. Yeah, and honestly, sometimes I get this question a lot from relatives at times too, still, that I haven't talked with in a while. It's like, oh, you used to be a software developer, and now you're doing something else that's not software developer, which also mostly comes with making not as much money as I used to. And, well, I think there's some a thought to be had about what kind of job you have and what makes someone else happy or me happy. In this case, my current job makes me very, very happy. Software development for me is just associated with stress if it was on a job context. So.
Oh, so what is being a software developer like? I have never been in the field or anything of that nature. That's why I ask.
Okay, I'm just gonna give the very blunt answer. A lot of things you do are very unnecessary. Lots of meetings at that time that just simply could have been an email, for example. It's very easy to get into, I guess you can say. But nowadays, looking for jobs here at least, sometimes I have tried back in the past, but it's just bad. It's like there's a lot of jobs out there, but the actual way to get through the well, interviews and whatnot, it's just sometimes very weird. And then, well, you get like your millionth rejection from such job place, and you just move on, really.
Okay.
So
Okay. So what kinds of things have you learned from running BOOTHPLORER since its birth? And where did you get the name BOOTHPLORER?
that's a very good. Those are both very good questions. The first question, which is also the more arguably the harder one. Well, the things I've learned honestly is like I have tried already several like side directions with BOOTHPLORER that just kind of didn't make sense at some point. So at some point, I had this like small social media questionnaire thing going, where where I would ask people something. Well, the social media accounts, would ask people stuff related to Booth for kind of like to get a bit of like an insight about what the community kind of like thinks. But then I thought like that makes no sense for a website that just does an app thing. It makes it act much like a company that has like a underage intern doing funny meme posts, kind of. So I kind of stopped doing that at some point. And other things as well that have been on the website before, such as a age slider and several other filters. Like age was a thing I added because initially I thought, but again, those are learning things, right? Is that I would actually be able to have a proper catalog that exists of it's very simple age gaps. Like you had like old, teen, and then young. And it's on Discord that I was on because I sometimes and I still go to popular Discords I'm in and I just type in BOOTHPLORER because feedback. What I've also learned is feedback is not really given to you directly. Sometimes it is, and it's very nice when that's the case. But more than often, the feedback that you are kind of like also looking for, or the feedback that you're especially looking for, is found outside of your walls, if that makes sense. So outside of your, in my case, my Discord for BOOTHPLORER, outside of Twitter DMs, outside of my own DMs, it's just outside. And well, doing that research has been very invaluable for me to kind of like sometimes fix or adjust things that people are telling with like some group of people agreeing with them, like, yeah, this sucks or this makes no sense. And then, yeah, you just take that as a feedback as well, even though it didn't get delivered to you directly.
Okay. And that led me to have a few other questions, but I will then lead into one of the ones I initially asked is where did the name BOOTHPLORER come from?
Oh yeah. You're exploring Booth, so it's a Booth Explorer. BOOTHPLORER for short, because well, it has the same. Everyone gets that the meaning is the same. It rolls better off the tongue, like BOOTHPLORER versus Booth Explorer. Just less tongue movement too.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. So I'm gonna lead in with one of the two questions I'll ask. One is, does Booth know BOOTHPLORER exists? And if so, do you know what their thoughts are of it? Or what their thoughts are?
That is actually my favorite question I have still to this day, because I have no idea, to be honest. But I did keep it in mind when thinking of features to make, because like obviously there are illegal websites out there that everyone probably knows at this point. Yeah, obviously those are not, but they shouldn't really, well, there is arguing to be had about like how those kinds of sites came to be, and stuff like how piracy for that kind of stuff is driven. But in general sense, saying it shouldn't exist is the best thing I can say in this case here. But I do think that copyright is a very important thing, and those creators, even though some of them are immensely popular, do work hard, especially creators that don't have as much popularity as, well, you could say. Those people do deserve to get, acknowledgement for what they make. And that's why BOOTHPLORER will never have assets that are directly from those models for share on the website. And sometimes though, I have to explain people that part though actually, because some people at first sight they will assume that it's something that allows them to get that stuff for illegal or for cheaper in some way, but it doesn't. It always links back to Booth.
Ah,
So
so it's more like a search engine for the website kind of thing.
technically, but with a fancy front end to it. It's like on its own, it's a very big backend database that has a lot of items already listed, and along with those avatars, and those are linked together with a link, as I would like to call it. And then you have shops that are associated with those items; those are also linked automatically. So it's essentially a very big database, and BOOTHPLORER, when you put it on your web browser, is a very one specific way that the database is displayed and searched through.
Ah,
But
okay.
yeah, saying it's a search engine is pretty correct
Oh, wow.
in that case.
How long did it take you to develop that website?
Initially thinking about the concept of how I would go out of my way to, scrap, fetch, copy those assets like on text and their images and putting it onto my website in a way that I can read. And that by itself took a little while because stuff that I've kept in mind, is like how fast would a method be, right? Like you could also do it manually, right? Like getting an item hand by hand and then putting it on your website. But I don't have the time for that. No one really should have the time for that. I would be concerned if that's the case. Except if you have like a smaller catalog, right? Then it makes sense. But something that should be bigger skill and you will do that by hand, that would be crazy man's work. So I thought up something at first to automatically get all those things, split them, kinda, sort them into certain values and indexes for those values, and tweaking that a lot. The initial version of the website took, I believe off the top of my head, 7-8 months because I was also settling for where exactly to host and future stuff like the CDN in this case that we have had not since the beginning but since a little bit like 2 months ago. Like those decisions about like where you think you want to go and how much spending you would expect to be doing because to mention, I don't have a Patreon or coffee for this yet, I should say. It's in the works, but it's like on the smallest stove of priorities, to be honest, because the upkeep of the site itself is not expensive, but at some point it will very likely increase in price as I will need more memory, CPU power and whatnot to process what's increasing in size essentially. Database keeps growing, of course, and the amount of users that keep using it, but also people just kind of like go there occasionally to look for things, like that also keeps growing. Truth to be told, kind of surprised that the machine I have it on currently can keep up, but yeah. At some point, I'm gonna have to like upgrade stuff, and then from there, thinking about like more of the financial side of things is more of a concern. But for now, it's not really a concern at all.
Okay. So what kinds of things were a challenge to you that you weren't expecting when first getting into BOOTHPLORER, and how did you overcome those challenges?
There's several answers to this actually. So one of the answers was first off settling with a kind of like a design that I was happy with because the site before I released version 1.2, which is currently the version running online, the website had a very different look, and I initially put it out because I just wanted the functionality to be out there and just think of the design later. But honestly, to me, making useful design that satisfies every user essentially is pretty much impossible. So, I have to take a lot of inspiration and do sometimes taking up in technical depth, which means something that you've made, but you've made in a very hasty and lazy way. You kind of have to redo it before you can make it, well, as good as you want it to be. Which is in this case also a big thing. Some parts have been rushed heavily, and I'm kind of like paying the price for it right now. If I want to work on something that I have on my Trello card, for example, it's all public in our Discord, by the way, in that terms too. I should note people that in case they would like to see what I would be currently working on. But yeah, when I'm working on something and then something else breaks, you're like, okay, obviously. And then that's for me, at least it's part of like, okay, obviously I have to fix that. And then that also goes in the list of things I have to adjust and fix. But
Oh.
yeah, learning from those things is like you just have to keep working on it, obviously, and just keep thinking and always be on the lookout to see something that catches your eye in terms of like web design or how a different website does a certain thing. Like I'm always on the lookout myself, so and can't really show much, but yeah, I'm working on a lot. That's all I can say really. There's a lot on my list that I want to do and will do.
I can only imagine. The only web design I've had some web design experience, but it's not like making websites. Back in high school, I took a vocational school, and it was very interesting. I think I did Flash. I did C, the C plus. I think it is the language, Flash script, and HTML
C++.
and Java. And I don't envy you. I'm impressed personally.
Well, I should note actually that for some people that do know about the languages, it is built in PHP. My profession has been PHP for like 6 years professionally, so yeah, I'm fine. Don't worry. If people are wondering if I'm mentally okay, yes, I'm very okay, despite being a PHP developer. Yeah, thank you.
You saying that reminded me one of the things my vocational school teacher said in the middle of class: 99 bugs in the code, 99 bugs in the code. Take one down, pass it around. 1,000 more bugs in the code. Yeah,
That's a classic. Yeah.
Yep. So you said earlier that this is the second question I was going to ask you. We kind of got sidetracked a little bit. I do apologize.
Yeah, I'm sorry. No, that's also my fault.
Oh, no, you've done nothing wrong. You said a lot of things that interested me, so I had to ask about that. You said earlier, this is kind of wanted me to lead back into that as well. Oh God. Which was earlier on, you mentioned that you had to the feedback from outside your walls is invaluable. Would you mind elaborating what made you want to reach out or search for that feedback, and how has that helped you grow as a person or a website?
For the website in that case, well, you just go to, for example, the VRchat Discord itself. In that case, I would just type in the words BOOTHPLORER or BOOTHPLORER.com, because if someone there happens to use it, or someone recommends it, for example, that's also important to see, right? If people are recommending the website to people when they're asking about booth things, or if someone mentioned it, for example, and someone else would say like, yeah, I've used that site, but it sucks though, right? Like these kinds of feedback are very important, and the only types or places where you'll find that kind of feedback where your app is being or directly mentioned, recommended, being negatively spoken about or being positively spoken about or just being mentioned somewhere. Yeah, you can only find that type of feedback outside of your walls, essentially, like I said before. Mostly negative, and that's a very good thing because that allows me to, well, keep working on it and make changes that should be made, because I obviously can always have an idea of like, okay, I should be doing this and that and this first. But I mean, people are not me and I'm not them, so being like the person that decides what would be a thing to make or not, kind of like sometimes just, well, simply doesn't work, and then you have to look for the feedback that determines what I should be working on instead.
What were some of the first bits of feedback you've gotten when you first started looking at feedback outside of what you see?
The age filter was a very big discussed one outside, and in hindsight, I completely get it. Because initially, as I said before, when I was thinking about the age filter, well, the year filter to be precise, it just kind of didn't work out, because every popular book model you see, at least, in general baseline of those designs is just an anime girl, like a younger anime girl. Like the reason I sold at some point for La Shusha, that's what the base is called, is because she looks a little bit more not like a small teenager that goes to school. And yeah, just general, just like how she looks and how she interacts, and yeah, what else comes with her. It's like, yeah, more like a human.
Okay.
You know what I mean? What I mean, right?
Yeah, I know what you mean by that.
But yeah.
Cool. Okay. when finding that as your first feedback, what led you to want to look at that feedback? Because it's not a common thing. A lot of people when they make things, I've noticed some people like wearing blinders and not seeing all those bad things per se. So that's why I ask.
Well, I'm kind of like a confrontational person in a sense, so it kind of like makes sense for me to decide that I'm comfortable in that regard to reading the feedback. But as I mentioned before, when I wanted to look for that feedback, I wanted to make sure that I got feedback of people that use the website, right? So, for example, if someone, in that case, with that context in mind, would use the website, and they would be like, huh, why does this have an age filter, for example? Or, huh, why does it have androgynous as a gender dropdown, for example? It's also one example. While by themselves, they're intended to be useful, they ended up just not really being useful. In regards to the gender slider, it was because there's no like real term on Booth, except for like a few select models that actually communicate that a model is androgynous. So there was like a certain baseline I've set by manually, well, looking through them, being like, do they have these features? If they did, then they were marked as androgynous. But the point being is that that just made things a bit too complicated to look for. So I removed the age filter, well, year filter again, and the gender filter, and the other filters I had before because I'm kind of like reworking the whole logic behind filters. But also because I want to bring the gender filter back by just being able to filter for male genders, because keeping in mind, Booth has an extreme popularity with female models, and, well, trying to look for a male base from Booth that has just enough items for you to work with is very uncommon. I mean, Minase, Anri, Tonere, and several other models come to mind that do have a catalog of items made for them. But comparing it to, like, say, Kikyo or Lashusha, even this case, I would say, the difference is still insane, especially if you have, like, a very popular model like Kikyo. Like, that one has, I think now, over 6.5k recorded items.
Oh, wow.
So, and when you compare that, when you compare that to a base that has less than 1,000, like, that's a lot. That's an insane difference, honestly. Which also obviously drives people choices as to what base they decide to use when they will look for a base on Booth or BOOTHPLORER and then be like, oh, I want to try Kickkill or Window or whatever. Like those other less popular bases will be very less likely to be chosen because of the lack of items or because they just don't pop up at first. Which is also kind of what I'm trying to do with BOOTHPLORER in a way, to bring out more uncommon avatars that are not the top 30 to people in a way. The homepage currently does that, but it's a very, very simple implementation. It's just there to fill in space on the homepage until I make a proper homepage.
Okay. So I actually have a few questions on that topic. The whole like avatar choices and ones. Why do you think there's a lean on Booth to go for female versus male avatars? And what is some of the most commonly used VRChat avatars?
So for the first question, it's like I like to compare it with like an MMORPG like Final Fantasy XIV or like World of Warcraft, because females tend to have, for most people's opinion, better looking outfits and items they can wear officially, but also being able to be edited more from its like base, right? Giving more self-expression. I think that's where female models to begin with on Booth shine. Like I did try out a male base at some point. I think with it in Blender. Tonera it was called, and well, Tonera is a plus head base. To give a bit of an example beforehand before I go on, Tonera is a plus head base. So there are other male bases out there that are also a plus head base that have items that are compatible with each other. So, for example, a maid outfit someone will make for Tonere would also be compatible on paper, and well, hopefully also in reality, with the other avatars that use that same body base, because the bodies themselves don't change. They have extra changes maybe, but the mesh that they use, their actual body part, that one will always be the same. But as I said before, I did try out Tonere, and the amount of blend shapes, because that's also a thing to kind of like keep into account sometimes, how many customization blend shapes come with an avatar. And Tonere, when I got Tonere into Blender, the amount of blend shapes he had compared to LaJusha or Moe, I've also used a Rindo at some point in a Kikyo, were just night and day difference, really. Like, I would say that LaJusha has, I think, like 8-9 times more blend shapes for the face and everything else than Tonera does. And Tonera's only blend shapes are shrink blend shapes, they're called, which people use to shrink parts of their limbs on their body so they can fit certain clothes. That's what I'm also doing here, essentially. If I were to have my legs unshrinked, my knees would very likely be clipping out of this outfit. So that's also why those blend shapes are very nice to have on a model. That's the only thing Tonera came with, essentially, and some very few head modification blend shapes. And that's kind of like a thing you'll see around all male versus female avatars. Female avatars just by themselves have way more features that makes people want to go to them in the first place, because they're very easy to edit. There's lots of items for the popular ones, and it's generally accepted in VRChat that you can be whatever you want, which is a very good thing. That's also why, despite me being very much a guy and going by he, him pronouns, I do like being a female in VRChat. So, but yeah, it's like your avatar being like a furry, right? So like it's like everyone's way to express themselves as well. And female models on Booth are just way easier set up for that you can just edit them in a way to make them just a little bit different than the base, or like a complete new thing. So yeah.
I wasn't trying to invoke some sort of war between male or female avatars. I was just curious as to why that leans. So that's all. That's why I asked. I was just more of interested in the information from the question than necessarily the answer specifically, if that makes sense.
Oh, okay. There's no war, as far as I know.
No, in terms of...
I'm very good male and female friends.
Cool. Yeah, I honestly don't care. It's VRChat. It's a video game. You could be whatever you want, so why not do it? We're all boring fleshies in real life. Why not be what you want in here?
Pretty much.
It's
just a cool way to make yourself look, right? Because if everyone's like a human, I mean, something about anonymity is also a thing, right? Like you not being like your actual self in these kinds of games, just like with MMORPGs, like being someone else you can be. Imagine if you had to be yourself in these kind of games, like Ready Player One kind of jazz stuff. Not exactly the same, because in Ready Player One they do use kind of like outfits and whatnot. They're not like their actual selves. To be honest, it's been a very long time since I watched that movie. But yeah, imagine if you had to be yourself, walk around in these social spaces. Anonymity is pretty sacred, I believe, as well. So yeah.
Very much understand. And I also, what are some of the most popular avatar bases or avatar models used in VRChat?
In terms of Booth, definitely bases like Kikyo and Celestia and Moe, and basically a lot of like names like you've probably heard or seen before on Twitter, like Rindo. LaJusha technically also is kind of popular. It's an avatar that is used, at least. There's also another avatar called Shinra that's very popular. You also have like a very cute bear called Mame Hinata that's also very popular. So it's not just that like the big like teen anime females are the most popular all the time, but well, I would say just reachers, to put it so, not in a blunt way, like Mame Hinata and Usasaki, if I remember the names correctly. Apologies if I just mispronounced them. But those are very small and cute, and can also be very customized to how you want to express yourself. So that's also a very good selling point for people to take these avatars, if they can edit them enough to make them their own thing.
So from you and BOOTHPLORER's side, if someone was to post a booth avatar, what are some things they should do from your perspective to get more views in terms of their avatar, if they're like just starting out or just posting something?
You mean like if someone were to publish an actual Booth avatar to Booth, and that me being the person with BOOTHPLORER eventually picks up that avatar from Booth and puts it in database and displays it, what I will personally think of it. Like making sure that
what kind of tips in terms of like the avatar as a Booth avatar should they bear in mind if they want to be seen more? Or what would bring more attraction, at least
Mm.
from what you see in your database and what you do in BOOTHPLORER?
Oh yeah, like that. No, that's actually a very good point. Because there are some people jokingly say that booth models kind of like suffer from the syndrome where they look the same. And that's essentially kind of true. Some avatars that have been released recently, they very much look like a Kokoa or a Kikyo, but just a little bit different. Or a Rindo or whatever, or Manuka with like a different like bucket of paint thrown over them, right? There's also like more unique avatars that get put out, and avatars that don't really follow that convention of needing to be a cute small anime schoolgirl looking type of avatar. But what I very often see is the models that look like the ones that currently exist, and when they get like a bit of popularity and backing from other item creators by people making items for that base, that's kind of like where it starts kicking off. Making sure that your avatar is very easily editable is one thing, but it's also people, for example, are more than happy to make an item for, say, Rindo, than say for an avatar base that only like maybe 500 people use, or that only has like, for example, 200 hearts and booth.
Okay. So in instance, making sure there's enough editability and customizations available for the avatar base. So in essence, it would behoove someone to like make extra assets outside of the avatar for people to choose from, if I'm understanding.
Yeah, because but also an important fact is that people will actually start using those avatars or will consider using them if they can see that these avatars have items most of the time. I mean, some people are just happy to just buy, for example, like a Leva and just upload it as is with no edits because they're already very happy how it looks, and that's fair. But for most people, like if an item or an avatar has like only 10 items, people are way less considering of trying it out versus an avatar that has like 2,000 more items. And sometimes when I do decide to buy a base that I haven't tried out before, just to kind of like look into the different parts it has. Like for example, I like robot parts a lot, so sometimes I kind of like just buy a model and just look for bits and parts that I could possibly use. And most of the time when I look into those models themselves, they're just sometimes I just miss my pointers, at least like stuff for me that is important in the base, like polygons, for example. If you attend clubs, and you have a avatar with a body base that is like 2 times already beyond 70,000 limit, let's just say a lot of polygons, then there are a group of people that wouldn't be really interested in using it because not everyone wants to spend time on Blender to decimate the model, for example. It's also about generally like some people care about lots of features coming with it. For example, from what I know, Fele, for example, is an avatar that comes with certain extra features that a group of people tend to want to sometimes use inside VRChat in a more adult way. And none of the other models do, right? And that's also kind of like why Fele is, I think, is taking off or has taken off, because it comes with these things set up for people to use, just out of the box kind of, right? Like how easy is it for me to buy this item or buy this avatar, install this avatar and upload it, or get this item, attach it to my avatar, and then upload that avatar with that item on it. It's like people have a certain point that they also want and are able to put effort into customizing their models. So that's also a factor.
Okay. So I'm gonna ask a question on terms of like the adult VR chat stuff because of some recent events, and I'm curious. Did you see any uptick in purchases due to Booth? I think it was Booth getting rid of adult content, or one of those websites getting rid of that adult content from their website.
Oh, you're talking about Gumroad.
Gumroad, yes. Have you seen an uptick?
Okay. Honestly, if there was one, it's very insignificant compared to the natural growth that the app has seen, actually. And one other thing is that BOOTHPLORER doesn't display any adult items. It's a very funny thing you asked this, because I think the type of adult content that sometimes is actually on Booth is, yeah, questionable of legality in certain countries. Now, to be very factual, the hosts that I'm on, that host the server, and also the CDN host, they have no specific laws relating to that kind of content. You know what I'm talking about, right? I assume when I say a type of content that's very popular within.
I think I'm picking up what you're putting down, but I'm not sure I do wholly. Hello, I'm going to quickly interrupt your video. Please come follow us on any of our socials. We have a card down that way in the description, metaversedegen.co. You can find us on Discord. You can find us on Twitter, which X, whatever. Right here in this space, you'll see the @ you can find me, Lion. And as well, we have a Patreon, which we've started a whole other show as a thank you for those who've signed up, such as Training Fangs, Forbidden Zero, and Niche. So thank you all for watching the video on how these games are going. I'll leave you to the rest of it. Enjoy.
Yeah, I mean, you can sense the word after you one, but it's lolly content. It's very questionable sometimes in certain parts of the world, which I understand fully. But that's why one of the reasons that BOOTHPLORER doesn't have adult items on display. It's because we can do it based on legal grounds. We can do it. We can host it and display it to people. It wouldn't violate any of the terms that I have with the hosting companies that I use. But also one thing to keep in mind is that not everyone wants to immediately be met with adult content by itself. Like, some people are not completely into the adult stuff in VRchat at all. I've met tons of people that would never ever do these kinds of things in VRchat, and they just want to see cute clothes for the avatar. There's also obviously a crowd of people that are very much into the adult side of VRchat, but it's important in that case to keep those two people in mind when working on BOOTHPLORER. But I think at the moment, actually fetching and then displaying these adult items is very low priority at the moment. But it is something that I'm looking at, though, because what I also like BOOTHPLORER to be technically is kind of like an archive. Like, when someone deletes the item on Booth, I can't link back to it anymore, right?
Yeah.
But I do have still some data on that item that they removed from Booth. So let's say someone removes like a rope from Booth that I already fetched for a specific avatar, I will still have the data of that item and their images, at least 4 of them max at time. But it's kind of like a little bit of an archival, if you know what I mean. Like, it will also still know the shop, the person who made it, the creator who made it, and how much it cost. So, and I think that's a little bit interesting when looking back sometimes at items that are on BOOTHPLORER, but no longer linked back to like an actual Booth page because they got removed by the creator. I think that's one of the, well, not by purpose, but kind of like intentional feeling things when I create BOOTHPLORER. It's very interesting to look at it sometimes, yeah.
Oh, so when building BOOTHPLORER and changing how things look and what kind of features you want, what kinds of things do you look at in terms of deciding on what you want to add or remove?
On BOOTHPLORER,
Yes.
if you mean like avatars in this case, because how BOOTHPLORER very simply put works is it needs like a baseline of IDs to search against for on Booth. That's with curl and whatnot, and that those baseline of IDs are the avatars that I do need to enable manually. Like, I do fetch avatars very much often, but they're just there, non-translated, hidden from public view, and not being fetched because, well, I have no idea how the avatar itself is, right? An avatar in this case could also be something that just, well, 1 second, sorry. That's something that like a very low poly red model, for example. Like, you have these kind of things out there, or like, for example, a very fat sumo fighter, right? Like, I've seen a model like that once as well when I was like browsing in general through the whole catalog of avatars on Booth. And those items are not really what I'm looking to put on before because they don't really have items first, and they're not really made with the purpose of, you know, what the other avatars are supposed to be in mind. But they are there, but they just won't be visible to public view. That's all, really.
Ah.
But factors like how popular an avatar would get is a factor for me to actually showing it on the website because, as I mentioned before, it's currently running on a very low performance potato somewhere in Amsterdam at some data center. And yeah, it already at times kind of like struggles to do the daily jobs I have queued for it in the back, right? So it can do it themselves, like cron jobs they're called. Yeah, it's struggling, but it's handling it kind of okay still. And as long as that still works, which it kind of doesn't sometimes, I should be thinking like, oh, do I need to upgrade or do I need to kind of like stop adding avatars for now? Which I've stopped adding avatars for now because of that very issue. But like when there's more, when space is dedicated better, like I'm changing a lot of things in the backend too to make it so that it just does things in parts instead of everything in one batch. Like that would also make an insane difference. But yeah, that's one of the decisional factors as well as like, can it handle having extra, essentially like to-dos on a list of stuff to fetch overnight to check does it fit with an avatar, yes or no? Or was it removed? Or did the price change? Or whatever else, really?
Okay. So what kinds of things do you foresee yourself wanting to do if money was not an issue? What kinds of things would you want BOOTHPLORER to do or become? What do you see in your future? Uh,
Hmm.
there we go.
Hmm. Well, for me, the actual issue I have is time because, well, I do have a job that actually, I'm not employed, luckily. Like I do explore on the side, and time is my only issue. But in terms of money-wise, if money was a thing I could just spend endlessly on it, it would be to look into, well, hiring or contracting several people for some additional support because the like BOOTHPLORER itself, like it's a website, right? And it's just a thing on a Discord server with some person from the Netherlands that has a Twitter account for it as well and a Blue Sky account and does whatever, right? That's essentially what it is at the moment with a few volunteer chat moderators and group moderators I have. But stuff like building booths for worlds, like if I don't know if you heard of it, but there's an event coming called Avifair at some point, and I was very interested
Oh,
in participating with a booth, but I have been very behind on my to-do list for BOOTHPLORER. Like, I'm not happy with the lack of changes I've made than I intended to. And also, I have no real knowledge about building booths in Unity. Like, you had to do it in Unity, build like a world thing, then upload a booth. Like, I have no idea how to do it. I mean, I don't mind learning things, but at that time, I just was like, yeah, I didn't really have the motivation to try and get myself into a drive to be able to get into the rabbit hole that is Unity world building. I mean, albeit for a booth, it will be very easy, likely, compared to making like an actual VRchat world. But still, it's like I have to understand some shaders, I have to make things look good, I have to make assets, stuff using, not sure if Flipbook would be the case, or like making animated assets, like that would take time. And at that time, I determined like, yeah, it's something for later to probably, for example, contract someone I know for several commissions in that case, because obviously, like I don't really care about not having a Patreon coffee on it, but if I were to like have people help me with my project, then obviously they would be paid off my own pocket. And stuff like in this case, like having someone that knows how to build worlds, in this case booths, and then would, for example, tell me what kind of assets they want, like that would have made the booth development for that event a reality on my side. But yeah, as I said, I don't really have that much time, unfortunately. And sometimes there are moments where I personally just feel like, okay, I just kind of like want to be laid back more and just do more things, like play games, play VRchat, right? There are some days where I'll be, well, I'll have like a day off from my actual job and just work on BOOTHPLORER for 4, 5, 6 hours straight, with no breaks. Now, eventually the break is me having dinner because then it will be like after lunch or something that I start like really putting in that time, or from breakfast to a little bit of early in the evening. But I do really love my project a lot, and I see it going many places if I keep doing the things I'm doing, and if I keep continuing to understand what people that use the website want, would like, and what they don't like, and I can align myself understanding the why behind these better without having to constantly search around and be like, oh, people are saying X is a bit weird or outdated. How did that happen, right? I shouldn't be needing to ask myself the question why. I need to already know why they would be saying that. But I think that, like, as I said before, like, the passive amount of users that use BOOTHPLORER more than a few times, sometimes maybe once, that number by itself, like people actually using it or having used it, keeps increasing, and I'm very happy to see that. It's also something I see very much in my billing that keeps growing for certain things. But yeah, that again, like I said, that part is whatever really. It's like I'm very happy that people see a useful website that they can use to, for example, look for bases that have face tracking support. Like one of the features BOOTHPLORER has at this time, which I think is a very good move on my part. Like I eventually just made the face tracking implementation that displays on avatars way better. It's a manual job to specifically make a filtered link, as I would like to call it in a technical term, like just a different link that tells my database, like this item that you have right here for window or tonera, that's a face tracking item for that avatar. And when that manual link is done, the front end will do a good job at displaying that if the avatar previously wasn't marked as being face tracking supported, it does now, and you can also filter for it. But it also displays it very neatly on the sidebar of an avatar view with the creator of the shop and the price. Just simple as that, like it's a face tracking item by that shop, so you don't need an image to see how such items look like, because you know it's about face tracking. So these kind of like very small derivatives on things that are still essentially the same, like it's an item being displayed, right? Like it's a simple booth item in a sense, code-wise. But these differences that you make into making the display in such a rich manner make that, I think that change specific actually had a lot of like contribution in me seeing the usage grow for BOOTHPLORER, and also seeing it being mentioned a few times more in several big and a bit smaller face tracking servers. I should also mention though that as I said before, like there are some ways that I can see this growth happening. Like I have Google stuff like bound to the domain name, and it allows me to get exact results or like amounts of like how many people are Googling BOOTHPLORER, how many people are clicking on things with BOOTHPLORER, whether people are Googling Windows specifically. Like if, for example, what has actually been one of the recent thing I've been seeing is people Googling Window VRChat or Window Booth, and then you get like a thing you see on Google that tells people like, okay, this is the amount of times that people based on that search result they put in our search engine have clicked on the window page for BOOTHPLORER.
Oh wow.
The BOOTHPLORER page for window. See, I need a second there. But yeah, it's like these small things that do tell me that people use it, and as long as people use it and find it helpful, and as long as I am able to determine what should be next for the app, then everything is fine. It can go on for a long time, honestly. I mean, in the worst case, some copyright legality things could maybe... I really highly doubt it, though. But, you know, in that case, maybe that happens. That will be the thing that kills my app. But other than that, it's very much built to be grown. Both physically, as in, like, the amount of people working on it, beyond just being me, and also like renting another server somewhere or an IP block somewhere to do things a little bit easier. Like these are kind of things that's all built for with that in mind. So future's pretty rich, I must say.
Okay. So I have a question that's going to relate to Booth sort of and is what you do. With things like face tracking as an example, how does Booth display the fact, or people on or shops in Booth display the fact it has face tracking or any specific features? And how do you look for them when doing the filter?
So in this case, Booth itself, so how you find face tracking items on Booth itself, so not using BOOTHPLORER, but Booth itself, is that you enter a tag of your avatar, like the item number, because all of those links, they have like booth.pm/ JP or N, and then /items, and /a huge array of numbers, like barrage of numbers. And that number is like the ID that you can also fill into search specifically for, well, these bases. They're face tracking in this case. You also add the face tracking VRCFT tag, for example. Or sometimes I also see a katakana one of face tracking, and then you sometimes get those items, like displayed, and then you can, well, sort them in that case, because you'll very likely get some other results at times. The filter on Booth when looking for things is pretty enthusiastic, so depending on how you were to supply or type face tracking, you could also get face makeup or face textures and not face tracking, because it sometimes just interprets what you're searching very broadly. And the way I sort that face tracking stuff for BOOTHPLORER is by taking the English translations that I get, because they get generalized a lot. So if, for example, in Japanese, you have 3 ways to write something. You have katakana, hiragana, and then also with kanji added, right? But if you were to take literally the word face tracking, that's how I found some of like Japanese people, their items. When you take the hiragana for face tracking or the katakana for face tracking, or with kanji written those words with hiragana for face tracking, and they put like a minus between it, like a separator, that's also sometimes where you can write it. But because of how translation works from Japanese to English with, in my case, DeepL that I use, it just gets put as one definition, face tracking. Sometimes with a break in between again, but it will always be face tracking. Nothing different really. So it makes filtering for some things rather easier, which also sometimes has a little bit of a negative side to it. For example, most of the avatars that we have, the popular ones, they have a gazillion nails on display, and it's just kind of weird seeing like 50 plus or some sort nail textures from the same shop for your avatar. Or like tattoos, for example, also one thing, like if you tick in tattoo on a popular base, you'll get way too many tattoo textures, sometimes from the same shop, because those shops make them very specifically to be compatible with the bases, right? But if you were to look a bit further, you just kind of like want to look around and imagine you see like a full page full of just textures, you're like, that's kind of like where the search bar comes in for, but it's a bit difficult then to search for stuff like hairs, because hairs can be written in multiple ways. So it's like, that's kind of like the things that BOOTHPLORER also needs improvements on, which I'm working on. But yeah, that's kind of like sometimes why it is better then to like search up with BOOTHPLORER in that case, or Avatar Network, that also works sometimes, right? But yeah, it's a very interesting feed on how to sort certain items, in this case, the face tracking.
So hold on. No, for some reason my camera is not wanting to work with me real quick, but here we go.
That's fine.
So with face tracking in mind, how common are face tracked avatars right now? Is there a wide array, or are they not common, or are they somewhere in between?
That's a very good question. I'm gonna be very honest with you. With all of the people I've met in VRChat, I think I only know 3 people that have face tracking. It's kind of like a niche thing, but it's a popular thing, if you know what I mean. So VRCFT, VRChat face tracking, probably seen it on Twitter a few times before. That is very popular with the people that are already using it, or the people that have interest in learning how to face track the avatars, be it modding a module on their headset, or being interested in seeing like if their items or their bases that they use, could also be Gumroad items by the way, have a face tracking DLC, to put it very roughly. But for me, I don't use face tracking, and I have no real interest in it, because the lenses I have in my index make it pretty much impossible for me to use a face tracking device, or at least for my eyes, because the lenses are way too big.
Yeah.
But I do really find it fascinating how people can get that stuff to work in VRChat, and it's kind of crazy when you talk with them and you can kind of like see them, animate themselves naturally, if you know what I mean. So like not like what I can only like close my eyes with some gestures and the thumbs up emote. That's all I have. But yeah, it's fascinating. It makes a conversation much more interesting, albeit how much you have to put effort into getting it to work at times, from what I know, is a lot.
Hmm.
So, unfortunately, nothing for me.
Ooh, I was just asking for like the database side of things from where you are in BOOTHPLORER, if it's you see an uptick of people including it in their avatars, or is it not a common thing? I do know in terms of what you said within my friend group, I see a lot of people gearing towards getting face tracking, if not having it or looking to get it soon. It does seem to be something I notice a lot of VR chat users that I know want. So that's why I asked, is it something you can easily get, or is it you're gonna have to pay someone to include?
Like that, yeah. Well, you have to, like in this case, when it comes to looking for those packs for booth avatars, you have to pay for the DLC. Like you're buying essentially, from what I recall, you're buying like some a modification thing to the FBX file of your model, and then it gets additional blend shapes, and then you have to put that kind of like together with VRC Theory, I believe, nowadays, and then it just kind of just works. TM, the famous quote. It just works, right? But yeah, as you said, like a lot of people that I do know, when they see the face tracking or they're thinking about it, it's like they are interested because it's a very cool tech. It looks cool. But yeah, I mean, you need to have like a module on your headset to make the face tracking work, or Quest Pro. I don't know if a Quest Pro is only eye tracking. That's kind of like how I'm not into the whole face tracking thing at all. Just the basics of like, okay, it allows you to track your face, and you need like a headset that is compatible with face tracking, right? That's the only things I really know, to be honest. But yeah, I do hear people talking about it, including my friends. Yeah.
Oh, okay. I do say at this moment I don't. There is a couple of headsets that I'm aware of that do it. The Quest Pro, but but I think that was discontinued. The Vario Aero, they do it. I do know one of Vive's recent standalone headsets has a module you could buy from Vive to get it, and it just kind of plugs into the eye sockets and it is both eyes and mouth, but it only
Oh
works
yeah.
for that
Heard of
headset.
that.
But I'm just kind of curious in terms of like availability of avatars.
Well, in
So,
this case, we actually are currently tracking 50 booth avatars that have a face
oh,
tracking module on BOOTHPLORER.
oh wow.
And I might be missing like 2 or 3 because I'm not tracking all avatars that are kind of like in the range I think that they would be even getting a face tracking module for, well, their base in that case. But yeah, 50 is a pretty big number, honestly. Like I was very surprised because I usually do these maintenances manually where I just check the database, do some searches, and it's like in the face tracking case, it's like, okay, there are these amount of items in the items database that have face tracking in the name that are not linked to anything. And then it's like, okay, just take a look. I put like their link in to manually check if they actually are face tracking devices, or maybe there was like a translation error, because that can always happen, of course. Like the Japanese names for those items get only translated to English with DeepL. So yeah, it's very simple, just like that.
Oh,
And yeah, as I said, 50, if I think about it, 50 avatars that, even ones that are like pretty cheap to use, like I know that Yukon, for example, is more on the cheaper side, I think, compared to like, let's say, Kick Your Window, that have like multiple face tracking modules as well, right? So you'll see that some avatars have just one. I know Hash Edits recently has done several for male bases that haven't had one yet. Tonere and Niger, I think. I'm so sorry if I'm getting this wrong, but I'm not really that home into male bases.
huh?
But yeah, like they made two face tracking items for no, two bases in this case, and yeah, you can kind of like see people, they make a face tracking module for an avatar that already had one, adding it to the list of the amount of like face tracking modules an avatar has, or one that just didn't have one yet. And yeah, it's, as I said, it's really cool to see that number just go up of like avatars having like an actual indexability when it comes to face tracking.
Hmm.
At some point, there's gonna be like a specific section for face tracking as well to kind of like make it part of like as a whole own thing. Like with a bit more like fancy stuff in there, and also like clearly showing like all avatars instead of like a page, because 50 avatars or like 100 isn't that much to render, right? So it shouldn't be like paginated. It's like going through like a book that has like these cards, right? Like these things you could put them in like like with Pokemons, right? And like you have
Yeah.
like page 1 has like 9 cards, and the next page only has 1 card. It's just weird. Like just put them all in the same thing that you can all see in one go. That's kind of like what I'm thinking of going with it. But again, it depends on how many more, like how popular face tracking will get. For example, like we could theoretically say that maybe next year almost all avatars, well, that's kind of like a drastic thing to say, like even more avatars will have face tracking made for them because, for example, the next headset from Valve has face tracking included, or like the newest one that Meta is making, new Quest Pro, for example. Like it's also about how accessible these things are to people that play and use VR. That's also very important. Like if the tech isn't there to actually support, for example, or dies out after, with it being native to Quest, for example, like if headsets were to no longer ever have face tracking built in, then yeah, it's gonna be less enticing to try and use one or to make a face tracking asset for base, I would say.
Well, I'm actually.
Well, I do know though, actually. Sorry, I
Oh.
should mention though that I do remember seeing that the people that are very experienced in face tracking, they can apply the knowledge to well for feature recommendations, for example, because features also need face tracking. But don't count too much to me on that. I do know that there's more merit, like more things you can do with the knowledge of being able to face track these avatars. But again, that's what I've read, that's what I've heard, because I do try to understand a little bit to a degree as to what something is. In this case, face tracking, right? Because, otherwise it will be pretty, otherwise the feature itself would never came to be like that anymore, where I would just like list them a bit neatly on the side instead of only being able to support one face tracking creator, because that's how it worked at that time. It only knew one face tracking creator. Part limitation, really. Technical depth, if you may.
I'm honestly quite surprised there's as many face-tracked avatars as you mentioned. 50 seems a lot more than I thought there'd be, even though it is very niche.
Same.
But in terms like the VR tech, at least within the VR community, I've noticed most things that the VRChat community wants, someone from the community will eventually end up building. It may not be an immediate result, but months or years down the road, you'll see someone like, oh, I really want face tracking. So I wish I remember the creator's name, but there's a person who's built eye tracking for VRChat, where it's like a self plug-in system. Although I wouldn't suggest using it because it's lasers, and you should be very careful where you use those. But there's this someone in the community made eye tracking system where you can just plug it into any headsets. A couple of lasers you put in. Hopefully, you don't blind yourself in the process, but in terms of like the community wanting things like face track, if big communities don't provide it, usually someone in the community will make it available.
No, that makes sense, yeah. It's like exactly like how easily accessible all these things are together makes for how people, easily can, for example, get the face tracking features enabled on like their headset through a module or like built into the headset, right? And then also be like, oh, I might as well buy a face tracking avatar because I have face tracking, right? But yeah, I think headsets do, as I mentioned before, do play like a role in making these things very more interesting to work on for people to make or people to use. But yeah, as you also said, 50 is a pretty high number. I think honestly, I expected it to be like only 20, right? But like some of the less popular bases, they also come with like a face tracking DLC, and that's pretty amazing. Something about like being able to express yourself better if you happen to have a base that is not as popular as Rendo Kiki and whatnot. If someone made a face tracking module for it and you happen to have a face tracking asset, then that's a bonus for you. Because the item exists. Like you can put it on your avatar and, well.
Well, even if it's just niche now, I'm sure people who add those things now, when face tracking does become more viable, it sets them in a really good position that when people are looking for avatars to use that tech on, where would they go? To you, you'd be ahead of the game. It'd already be in existence and be already used base. It's advantageous.
I mean, ahead of the game ahead of the game is kind of like a very competitive word. The point with BOOTHPLORER is not to be competitive with anything at all. It's just the main goal for BOOTHPLORER is to be a useful piece of application that people can rely on to make searching for the booth assets just a tad bit easier. Being with the fact that you can follow bases when you log in with Discord, for example, you can follow up to 3 bases, and whenever you would visit the website while you're still logged in, you can see how much new items your base has gotten.
Oh,
I mean, every day, personally for me, every day I just go to the page of Lashusha directly, and I just click by showing new items, and I get all new items that have been added to the database and linked to Lashusha.
oh,
It's for me, it's like for my own use, it's also just perfect, honestly, at the moment. I mean, it has like a lot of improvements it can have. But for me, using it to actually find items and, well, like considering trying out things and see how things look, right? Like, is it like an outfit that I would like to put on my avatar, or is there nothing really that I would like? Maybe someone made like a cool. I'm not the type to wear these kind of things, but like people wear earrings, right? Like those are also things that people tend to sell for avatars, or like tongue piercings. Those are also getting popular, I've noticed. Tattoos as well for your body that you can stick on. Like those are all ways for someone to self-express, and yeah, the amount of new items that keep getting added to BOOTHPLORER that link to an avatar, it's the variety is insane. Like it can be eye textures, can be outfits, can be just shoes, for example, hairs, nail texture sometimes too, maybe an occasional tattoo. Maybe something pretty new, like an elf ear you can put on your avatar that replaces the ears on your avatar, for example. Like there's a lot of different items that people put on Booth, and seeing those appear on BOOTHPLORER is it's very nice to see. It's a testament to how well it works actually for me,
oh.
which is nice.
I say that's actually a pretty cool feature. I'm not big into avatar building, but the fact that you can follow a base and get all the objects that are linked to the base actually seems like a very useful detail. Is that one of your favorite features
hmm
from the website, at least to you personally, what you've built?
Um, well, BOOTHPLORER by itself
Yeah.
was built at first with the ability to look through all the avatars. So you would have a list of all avatars I've indexed, and then when you were to click on an avatar, you would go to the page, see some basic information, then all the way below there would be like a very huge item browser that you can use to browse items. That has been a thing on BOOTHPLORER since day one, actually, to be honest. And yeah, it's very, very amazing to like look, for example, at like a base like Rindo or Kikyo. Like if you were to type in the words "made," get like so many items. It's very beautiful to see. It's kind of like a very coherent database by itself. Like as I mentioned before, BOOTHPLORER is essentially a front end that is built where it gets information from a rather huge database, which keeps growing every day with a lot of items, and displays them in a specific way to the user that is using BOOTHPLORER. And for example, a developer API using my database is something I've planned for the long term. Like there's already a lot of like long-term plans for BOOTHPLORER as well, with all of that in mind to make it useful, and to also make sure that it helps people fighting stuff for Booth. Preferably in a way that they will purchase the item, because BOOTHPLORER does make it unfortunately a little bit easier for someone to quickly look for specific things, and could be used to, for example, it's very simple, honestly. You can easily Google the item IDs of an item on certain websites or just on Google itself, and you might find someone that already illegally re-uploaded to share, and that's kind of like the unfortunate part with BOOTHPLORER being able to very easily display new items, and also sorts the items of an avatar link by the date they were added. So you'll be very able to see easily how new an item kind is. But BOOTHPLORER's part in that topic is to display more information so people are more sure about what they're buying and whether the thing they're buying is compatible with their use case. So an example that I would like to mention that's related to that is a Lashusha, for example. Like many Booth avatars, she comes with a toggle to make her breasts flat or bigger. In my case, they're just set to the default number, but you'll see that a lot of clothing that you can get for Lashusha by other people, they only know two types of boobs. The default boobs or big boobs. Like you cannot, there is no blend shape to scale them to small. And if you are someone that has no Blender knowledge, right, and you use Lashusha without breasts, essentially, you're just here with an item that just doesn't work for a use case because it makes, you don't put breasts on your avatar, and not suddenly you have a clothing piece that you can't make smaller through blend shapes, through the same fashion as you make the breasts of your avatar smaller. And from what I've seen, from what I know, the reason for people to go out of their way sometimes to just not actually buy the things is because they are just not sure if the item they're buying for 2k yen, which would roughly translate to like 16-15 euros, I think, has everything that they are looking for. Because one could argue that, for example, that situation I just named is a basic necessity of an item, but someone that made the item could also go out of the way to list on the page like, hey, there's only support for the normal breast or the big breast. But you understand what I mean when I say that when people buy it with no way to refunding it, they buy a 3D asset and it ends up just not being usable for them. It does invoke a feeling of frustration, which I hear quite a lot of people say. And with BOOTHPLORER, I mean, I'm making something that, for example, can read the blend shapes that are with a item out of an FBX. I need to own the item first, obviously, before I can have it process such a manner to give me that data. But for example, if I were to have the FBX file of, let's say, I mean, I do have, obviously, I have the FBX file for this because I'm all about it. But let's say I have the files for this clothing piece, which I do. I put it into that parser, and it will tell me that it has a breast shrinking blend shape that shrinks the big breast to the default breast. It's very important to mention this specific thing as well, because it also means that this doesn't work with small breasts. I mean, I'm honestly not sure if that's the case for this one, but let's just say it doesn't. Having that data and being able to display that in a way that I can list on the item page or somewhere like, hey, this item doesn't work for a small breast because it only has support for the default and the big breast. Like maybe you want something else, allowing you to filter for items away. I must say, filter items away that do not allow you to shrink it to the smallest chest size. Because again, it's part of self-expression identity. Like I have an avatar that is like flat-chested, and then suddenly having to walk around with some normal breast, it's weird. I mean, I can imagine it's weird if I were a flat chest user, which I used to be. But again, it's a bit more of a base problem too. Like most items have it for certain bases, and most don't. So the Shush in this case barely has any small breast items compared to, say, Kick Your Window or Moe.
Oh, that's good to know. I'm glad that you're working to make that information available and visible for people who are buying things. Now, that kind of leads me to another question I have. What motivates you to keep BOOTHPLORER going and to keep on working on BOOTHPLORER?
Honestly, the fact that I use it myself. Like, as I said before, like I use the website and the thing that I made to look for items for my base every day. Or sometimes if I just feel adventurous and I kind of like just want to know what other avatars have been added ever since the booth, I just run the things I need to run, or just wait on the back end of like the production server to do the thing, and then I can also pull everything in there. For example, like I mentioned at the beginning somewhere that I have a high interest in robotic parts, right? So I'm still sometimes just looking through indexes of avatars that I have, like image-wise. Like for example, I would see like a robot girl that's like new, and I'll be like, oh, for example, her arm looks interesting, or what she's having on her leg looks interesting. And well, in this case, I'm saving up money for vacations and travel. But what I would do like a year ago is I would just buy that asset and just, well, put it on Blender, take it off, see how well it like meshes with, for example, my Celeste I used to have has some parts and bit of Blender editing. But then you're like, oh yeah, made this myself, and it makes you feel, make me feel proud, at least, I would say, in terms of like the self-expression part. And it's also very funny that it can be done easily in such a way, like some niche case, in this case, my niche thinking of like, oh, I want just robot parts to kind of like pull out of avatars. Yeah. It's kind of nice to know that can be done easily with a few searches on BOOTHPLORER and some other magic that I only can do really at the moment. Well, yeah, instead of having to search through Booth, loading page after page after page for like God knows how long, honestly. Like sometimes it's also just very slow. So the speed is also a very big factor for me. Like as long as it's faster than Booth, which it will obviously be, then yeah, I'm more than happy to just keep it up, keep it running. And well, as I just said, I also use it, so it would be weird for me to take something down that I don't use. And especially when people are saying that they find a great use sometimes in using the application to find things that they want for the base or a specific item or a complete new base.
Oh, well, thank you very much for joining us, and I learned so much amazing stuff from you. Where can people find you if they wish to find you? And I appreciate your time, by the way.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. Yeah, I'm so sorry for talking so much, but there's like so much I can tell about it, to be honest.
Please don't
I'm
ever apologize.
I'm very good at talking.
No problem. Please don't ever apologize. In the real world, I got to get ready for work here soon. That's why I've got to get his.
No, that's
Otherwise,
fair,
I'd let you run on for as long as you want. With me, don't ever
Yeah.
apologize. If you want to talk about something, I enjoy hearing about it. Unfortunately, I do have.
Thank you so much for having me again.
Oh, no problem. Let me turn on my voice tracker too. Either way, thank you very much for joining us. It's been an absolute pleasure getting to sit down and meet you. So thank you.
As for the links, by the way, as you were talking about, I mean, I have a personal Twitter, but honestly, if you just want to find me and my project, just go to BOOTHPLORER.com. Like, it also has the link to the Discord, the link to the Twitter of BOOTHPLORER, and well, yeah, and then on the Discord it's also like several links. Like, it's very contained, but honestly, there's no point in promoting myself here. Just consider, if you haven't ever heard of BOOTHPLORER and you kind of like want to try to find some Booth things, or just look around a little bit, just enter BOOTHPLORER.com on your favorite web browser. It works pretty okay.
Okay.
There's some bugs here and there, but I'm working on them. I'm working on them.
Well, I would say Raptor do the thing, but Raptor left to go to work himself, so I will say this instead.
Yeah.
I know some of you out there have said quite a lot that you want to learn to make an avatar. Why don't you hop on BOOTHPLORER.com, get on, boot up Unity, and do the thing you said you'd do. Come on now, it's easy. There's a website that helps you find everything here. There's no excuse other than your time. See you in the metaverse.
Exactly.
Guys.